Mr. Hopkins. Okay, so I'm back for intellectual well-being. It's gonna be a party. We were just listening to the song "Lost in the World" by Kanye West and Bon Iver. It is one of my favorite songs. It is so good. I feel like I'm lost in a world that I don't even know. I don't know. Whatever. That was like, I guess I was gonna make a pun, but it wasn't. Whatever. Anyways, it's a really good song. You should try listening to it. Work out to it. It's great. Again, "Lost in the World" by Kanye West featuring Bon Iver. Great song. It pumps me up. What can I say? Alright, so intellectual well-being. The ability to gather, process, recall, and communicate information. Alright, where am I? And where am I going? Alright, so where am I? Well, one can look at this from a matter of angles. So I guess the first angle to look at it would be from an academic angle. To gather, process, and recall and exchange information. Okay, well, if exchange you mean, okay, communicate, yeah, alright. So I think that I'm pretty capable of communicating information through things like papers and essays and things like that through my opinions. I mean, writing is something that that I'm passionate about and can do. Like, I don't think I struggle with that really. So I think communicating my thoughts and opinions in that form was not that difficult for me. I think it comes pretty naturally. But gathering and processing the information, that's hard. Because in school, if you gather, like researching, that's difficult. Because you have to kind of sift through information. So say I'm looking for like the date that, I remember, at one time I was looking for the date that Bangladesh gained independence, right? And I had to check all these places because I was getting similar dates, but they weren't all the same, and it was kind of important for the research paper that we were creating. So I just searched and searched and searched for that, and then finally I decided to kind of like average them out, sorta. And so I forget what date it was. I think it was August 11th, 1947, I think. But that's not relevant. So, I mean, gathering that information, that's hard, I guess, because you also don't want to take it from someone who has no idea what they're talking about. But if you're desperate while writing something like I am the majority of the time, you'll take anything that revalidates any information you think you had to begin with. Processing information, so interpreting what people say, that's hard because I'm a teenager in what I consider to be a grown-up world, and this grown-up world has enough problems communicating between grown-ups as it is, so it's like hard to kind of read for me to read like a New Yorker article, right? And I'm like, what is this? This is ridiculous. The start and the end, what the hell? Like, those had nothing to do with each other. And for me, that's hard because as a teenager, we don't really have, I mean, we might have deep conversations, sure, but usually it's not organized like maybe an article or an adult's speech or address maybe, because those are about more serious topics, which I know less about because like I said, as a teenager, I feel like those serious topics, even though I address serious topics every day going to school, those topics like healthcare and whatnot, I mean, it's hard to put that into the daily vernacular of a teenager like myself. I mean, I like to read, but write, but I don't really read that much. I read like magazine articles and 17 Oprah and Cosmo, but those are not especially complex. So processing that information, interpreting it to speak Margot rather than speak, what's the, Nicholas Coolish. He's this writer for the New York Times. He's the only one who I ever understand. I mean, it's just kind of like you have to translate things, and like highlight things with your mind. But then if you look at it from like a more intellectual well-being, that is, if you look at that ability to communicate and gather and process and recall from an angle that isn't quite so literal as school, you would say, okay, well, in a social situation, if you're having a conversation with someone, to gather information, so to me that means, okay, so you look at them. What do I already know? Okay, boy, girl. Favorite color, perhaps, if they're wearing all blue, that sets off a very specific signal in my mind. Let's see, what else can you do? Okay, so you meet a person. Favorite color, boy or girl, man or woman, what have you. I don't know, let's see, what else? How they dress. Okay, so I'm into that as someone who loves clothes and style and all that other great stuff, even though I wear sweatpants to school half the time you see me. I mean, okay, so you have the people who, like, dress in, like, sort of a more conservative way that might reflect part of their personality if they don't reveal a lot about themselves, and their emotions in that conversation might be reflected by their clothes. So if they're, everything's all ironed and pressed, it's like nothing can be flawed, no background struggle can be reflected through my clothes, and people might be like that socially as well. And then there are people who are like pretty low maintenance, just chill, pair of Levi's, white t-shirt, no big deal, whatever, life is good, right? Then there are other people who, I don't know, who dress in like many little pieces. So they might have like a nice pair of earrings and then like, and then like a necklace with a pendant and like a skirt and a blouse and a pair of shoes, and they all match perfectly. And then they might have like some cool funky eyeshadow technique or something. Like that's like, I mean, I don't know, that can reflect people being high maintenance, that it can also say, oh look, I care about what I look like, and things like that. So there's the visual aspect of intellectual communication in a social situation, then processing that information, saying, well, what does that mean about them? Recalling that. So if you're actually conversing, what did they say? They had 3 dogs? Okay, I heard that. So that's really interesting. I wonder if they're, they make donations to the MSPCA or, what's it called? MSPCA? Yeah. Or something like that. I don't know. I mean, those little tidbits of information can reveal a lot more than people think they do. And I mean, you're not necessarily in this conversation to be a detective or anything, but in terms of, like, learning about someone through that conversation, you can learn a lot more than they think you can. Not that it matters. I mean, not that people are, like, guarding their life or something. I don't know. But, and then recalling that information. In my mind, recalling information from a personal conversation, that's like personalization. That's setting person A from person B in your mind, saying, all right, well, what's different about them? What separates them? What makes one more interesting than the other? What makes one think that they might be a better friend to me than the other? Could I, if I needed help with a certain situation, go to them because that's their area of expertise? Recalling that information, that's important, and that makes people feel good if you remember what they said. So I could tell you, hey, I work at a book editing firm. If you ever need anything, call me. If you call me and seek me out, then that makes me feel good. That makes me feel like I made a good impression on you, It's like earlier this year we talked about journals and like people remembering your name. That feels good that you stuck out, So I guess that's how I would look at intellectual well-being, is how you separate people and things, how you can interpret what they tell you, what and how you separate what they tell you and what information they give you, separating that and what you're looking for, you know? So I think in terms of where I'm going, I think I'm going to a place where being an adult, you really need to be able to recall that and depend on others. And I think intellectual well-being has absolutely everything to do with that, depending on others, communicating, depending on that information that they communicated to you, you know? So I think I'm going into a world where that's essential. So if I have a job interview, for example, I think I'm going to need to know a lot of the information that I'm already given, and I'm going to need to be able to interpret that, however abstract that may be, for my own good. So I think that's just about it for intellectual well-being. I'll see you next time.